Hello, good evening. Welcome to the executive meeting of the 28th of October 2021. Here present is myself, I'm leader of the council, John Kaiser, deputy leader and executive member for the finance and housing, Parry Bath, the executive member for the environment and leisure, Graham Howe, the executive member for children's services, Pauline Jorgensen is online but not present. Charles Margetts, executive member for health, wellbeing and adult services, Stuart Monroe, executive member for business and economic development, and Gregor Murray has given his apologies but is being deputised by Laura Blumenthal, who is present and will take us through that piece of the business, and Wayne Smith, executive member for planning and enforcement, and Bill Sohn, the executive member for neighbourhoods and communities, and supported by Anne Hunter in Democratic Services and her team. So also present is Clive Jones, the opposition. So welcome all. Please ensure that your mobile devices are off. He says, trying to check whether your mobile device is off. It's actually not. And if you're participating via Teams, when you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphone. He says, to assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone participating via Teams turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking and introduce themselves whenever they speak, apart from Pauline? Please note that to avoid the chat function on Teams being used inappropriately has been disabled for the meeting. Please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. As I said, the apologies for Pauline, who's on Teams, Gregor Murray, who's away. First of all, can I have any comments on the minutes? No. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll propose minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And just a little few words on starting the meeting. Since last we met, David Amis has been brutally murdered during a constituency surgery, and James Brokenshire lost his battle with cancer. Our thoughts are with their families. Our hearts also go out to our friend and colleague, Gary Cowan, in his time of sorrow at the sad loss of Katie, his closest friend, wife and long-time supporter of local democracy. As the first council leader who declared a climate emergency, I'm delighted that COP26 will this week address the most important issue facing our world. I'm very proud of what we at Wokingham have achieved and will be achieving as our contribution. I hope and pray that there will be tangible outcomes in which we can participate and which will accelerate our own ambitions. COVID rates in Wokingham, in conjunction with neighbouring boroughs, have steadily been increasing above the national and southeast average. It seems now to be flattening off. The increasing rates have not affected hospital inpatient rates or death rates from COVID-19. Most cases in England, Berkshire and Wokingham are in the 11 to 18-year-old group who haven't as yet not been all vaccinated. The Delta variant is circulating widely with national restrictions advisory for face coverings, twice weekly LFT testing for those who work or above primary school age, more testing if you're in contact and isolate if you're positive. West Berkshire, Wokingham and Reading were all affected by the apparently high rates of false negatives at the Immensa laboratory. What can we do? Vaccination is the most important action to promote. Encourage anyone and everyone who is eligible to have all the vaccinations. Boosters are being offered for all those over 50 or clinically vulnerable health and social care staff when they reach 6 months post the second vaccination. If a resident is due for a vaccination and they have not heard from the GP, they can either visit a walk-in site or book an appointment through the national booking site. NHS providers are arranging vaccination of their own staff with social care staff using a national booking system. Young people aged 12 to 18 are being offered one dose of vaccination. These also can be booked via the national booking site. The school immunisation service is visiting all schools in turn to vaccinate 12 to 16-year-olds. There will be a significant number of children unable to attend these due to isolating at home with COVID-19. Catch-up clinics are being arranged and they can access the national booking service. This age group cannot visit a walk-in centre. Wokingham has above national uptake rates of COVID vaccinations. The only message is that we please use face coverings where encouraged to do so and remain cautious in your contact with others. We have been notified that we should be subject to a ward boundary review within Woking Borough for elections from 2024. Whilst there are options, what is clear is that our current system will have to change. All councillors have now been briefed on the process and the council has some work to agree a consensus on the way forward. The extent to which poor financial management has crippled Slough Borough Council makes horrific reading, but emphasises how robust controls and disciplines throughout our organisation are essential. The administration cannot make spending commitments outside the MTFP without a supplementary estimate. Other members and officers need to be aware that any such commitments can only be recommendations to the executive. We are assuming the budget and we are assessing the budget yesterday and will not really know what it means for us for some time. In common with many other local authorities, we're experiencing cost pressures arising from an overheated economy and issues with the supply chain. We are experiencing the pressures most acutely within the construction industry in terms of both material costs and labour. We will also become exposed to the well-publicised increase in utility costs, in particular gas and electricity. The council is largely protected from the increase in energy prices for this financial year, as the price supplies have been locked in within the terms of the contract, and the sustainability of the supplier is confirmed. However, there will be significant impact on the MTFP, which we are in the process of formulating following the annual review of charges in the gas and electricity supply. We estimate the impact to be in the region of 600k. Some of our revenue income lines are becoming increasingly challenging this year as they are dependent upon income from asset construction. And I expect we will have to remove the 700k per annum additional income, which we've initially factored for the next year. From a broader perspective, we will need to keep a close eye on general inflationary pressures across the council, pressures already alerted by the Bank of England Monetary Committee. We have already conducted an initial review of our capital programme for this year and draft proposed capital for the next 3 years. It currently tells us that whilst many of the current works in progress are protected by fixed price contracts, it is highly likely that those not yet tendered will see an increase when future bids are received. We have already identified additional pressures on specific capital items of up to 10 million, and this assumes that where we have general work programmes, we will have to stop once the budget has been exhausted. It also assumes that we will not be facing a similar demand-led cost increase in the highways sector, which will be another area to closely watch. It therefore remains incumbent on us to factor these pressures into our financial planning assumptions and take the necessary measures needed to balance our ever-tightening budgets. Good financial management and rigour has been a hallmark of this council over many, many years, and the coming years will provide yet another test for our capable officers and councillors. Regrettably, well-meaning spending desires arising from committees and working groups outside of the executive will have to be considered by the executive in this challenging financial context. The Oak Tree School is suffering a delay in the provision, which will impact on pupils and the MTFP. I'm particularly sensitive about the Twyford Library project, as I've initiated, negotiated it, arranged for funding and planning permission. I'm not surprised by others claiming credit, however concocted as it is a fabulous project. However, as I've been intimately involved with it, it is necessary that it has the greatest scrutiny. In the meantime, I need to point out that there is still an existing library which has recently been refurbished. As I said last month, I've been lenient with questions to the executive and have done my best for them to be all answered. However, I would point out there's a time limit. The questioner who's put a question in personal might also put a supplementary question without notice. A supplementary question must arise directly out of the original question or the reply and must not introduce subject matter. I will reject a supplementary question on any of the grounds in Rule 5437. The supplementary question must not be longer than 1 minute, and most importantly, if I consider that the question is making a statement, I will rule that the questioner be not further heard. Thank you very much for your indulgence. And now to public. Any public questions? Declarations of interest. Can I ask for declarations of interest? I'll start off with, I'm a non-executive director, unpaid, of Optilis Holdings Limited.
I'm also a non-executive unpaid director of Optilis Holdings Limited and also the housing companies.
And I'm also a non-executive director of Working Holdings Limited.
And same for me.
As Holco, non-executive director of Holco. Thank you very much. Any public questions? No. Member questions. Paul Bishwick for Pauline, who's online.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Pauline.
Paul, we can only see the top of your head.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
It is a bit better, yeah.
Is that a bit better?
Yeah.
Thank you. At the 17th of September 2020 meeting of Council, I asked a member question, item 65.3 refers, related to the winter maintenance plan. The Highways Winter Maintenance Plan indicates that it will be reviewed annually. On that basis, what additional walking and cycling routes will be included in the 2021-22 plan to ensure that these routes are safe and usable throughout the winter period for pedestrians and cyclists? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, good. This does work surprisingly, isn't it? So the Highways Winter Maintenance Plan has been reviewed as it is each year, considering the following factors. Skidding accidents where freezing conditions have been cited in Thames Valley police personal injury accident reports. The location of on-road shared or dedicated cycle routes. Bus routes. Known wet spots. Bridge decks, viaducts, etc. Partnership working with Highways Maintenance Term Contractor, that's Volker Highways, other departments of the council and other contractors. Previous snow impacts events and their impact on the borough and its residents. Comments from parish and town councils, members and residents. Requests for additional salt bins from the parish and town councils, members and residents. And car parks. And obviously we've looked at coronavirus as well. Based on the number of issues identified in relation to cycling and walking in the borough during the review, we haven't identified a need to change our existing approach in the current time. The issue we've got is the low volume of use and nature of cycle routes in the borough means that salting dedicated routes wouldn't be effective, as refreezing would be likely to occur shortly after application because the number of cycles using them is not high enough. We will, of course, continue to monitor cycling levels, and if routes are identified that would benefit from salting, they'll be added to the secondary salting network. It's worth noting that we've obtained 10 small push-along gritters, which were purchased last year and have really helped improve our ability to grit pedestrian areas evenly and efficiently in our town centres. And these could be used on dedicated cycleways as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have a supplementary, Paul?
I do, thank you. and thank you very much for that information. The current HGV driver crisis has impacted on the green waste collection service. How will winter maintenance be continued while still maintaining other council services?
I'm not sure it's directly connected to the question, but I think you'll note today
it is connected because of winter maintenance and
yes,
HGV
so
drivers.
Announced, I think today, if not yesterday, that the green waste collection is back to normal and that we've restarted it, and I don't foresee any issues with the gritting.
Okay.
If you have any issues, of course, Paul, I'd be very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, it's the additional hours of working whilst undertaking salting as opposed to snow clearance, which then becomes an emergency.
As I said, I don't foresee any issues, and we've returned the green waste collection service to normal. But if you think there are issues, or if you find issues, please get in touch with me as quickly as possible, and we'll make sure we deal with them.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Imogen, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Far away. I always think you're in bed when you're lying there.
I have a very comfortable chair. It's where I spend my days, I'm afraid.
Fair enough.
Okay. I was looking at the bus service improvement plan. Our new housing estates are filling up with residents, and we have bus shelters along the main roads, such as Queen's Road in Wokingham. But as of yet, we have no bus services to these neighbourhoods. Understanding that this council has declared a climate emergency, and we need good public transport to be an alternative to persuade people to get out of their cars, and cycling and walking does not necessarily work for everyone, especially in bad weather. To be useful, the bus services need to be running in the evenings and at weekends, and they were supposed to be available when people started moving into these estates. So when are we likely to see a regular bus service going around our new housing estates?
Thank you, Imogen. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. You're fine.
Good. Okay. So the bus service improvement plan, as you'll have seen from tonight's agenda, is a high-level strategy. It's not intended to provide detailed amendments and delivery dates of every bus service in the borough, but you can see from it how much we actually do spend on bus services, a considerable amount of money, in order to try and encourage people to use bus services and provide appropriate services for them. Development in Shinfield and Spencer's Wood has already been provided with additional bus services to serve new homes in Croft Gardens and the Thames Valley Science Park. In North Wokingham, the 121 service was amended to reroute the bus through Mulberry Grove, using Section 106 funding to cover the costs. Both bus services have developer funding until 2026 to try and establish commercially sustainable services, although the pandemic has had a significant impact on passenger levels and growth. Currently, passenger recovery rates are 65% of the pre-COVID level. Bus services need to recover before new services are added. Adding new services when passenger demand is low results in high operational costs and low onboard revenue. Ultimately, where passenger demand is low, there's a risk that developer funding will be exhausted before the services become established. So we need to try and introduce it at the right time so it's got a chance to be established before we run out of developer funding. And then, because the last thing we want is to have to withdraw a service because it isn't viable at the end of the developer funding. Bus services for the new developments will be addressed as part of the Enhanced Partnership Agreement, and the Enhanced Partnership Agreement will provide greater detail on the frequency and days of operation of bus services, along with commitments to delivery dates. The agreement will be available on the 1st of April 2022. As you'll see, we've got some pretty ambitious targets in terms of improving the bus services, improving the integration, improving fares, improving ticketing, and really actually making the bus services as good as we can.
Okay. Am I allowed my supplementary, I guess?
Yes.
By the way,
it's good to know that, you know, you're at least thinking about the bus services, and I realise it's not a complete thing yet, and it's good to know that they are improving. The thing we have in Wokingham is there really isn't a very good evening bus service. Everything sort of stops about 8 o'clock. I believe the bus service, the last bus to Woos Hill, leaves town at 19:05, and if you were a commuter coming out from London, that's a little bit early for you. Also, if you are, if you're living on Finchampstead Road, there's no bus service. In Barkham, I think the last bus is about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it's not really, if we want people to leave their cars at home, this is kind of crucial to the climate emergency, to provide an alternate public transport service that people can choose so they don't use their cars. And I'd really like to know what is the plan, particularly in the runs up to Christmas and when there is poor weather. What are the alternatives we are providing for people other than using their cars, particularly Wokingham?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Imogen. I mean, my profession is transport, and one of the things that is very clear from transport theory and reality is that the more frequent you have services and the more convenient they are for where people want to go, the more people use them. That's undoubtedly correct. But we do have to get to a position where the bus services are viable and economic. I mean, as you see the bus service improvement plan roll out, things we've been talking about, things like the bus service to Winnish Triangle Station, which shuts off too early for anybody who's using it for commuting.
6 o'clock, I think.
Exactly.
Like that.
It's hopeless if you're actually using it for a day at work. And those sorts of things are important to try and see if we can work with Reading buses and other bus providers to make sure that we get services that match as much as possible the desire, so that they get more passengers, we get more usage, and in the end, we provide a bus service which is viable. I think that's the key message. So I'm on the same page as you as far as frequency and timing is concerned, but we can't afford to spend unlimited amounts of money on bus services, unfortunately. We already spend 810,000 a year on supporting bus services. We spend almost £1 million on concessionary fares, and we also spend over 100,000 towards community transport and volunteer services. And we also spend about 400,000 on Section 106 on supported bus services. So there's very significant amounts of money. John's given a very good summary of where the finances of the council are. We need to get these bus services frequent, and we also need to get them viable so that they are operable and provide the bus companies with a revenue that means they can continue to deliver them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. And to the business of the day, John, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report.
Thank you very much, John. Before I get into the paper, I just wanted to say, following on from John's opening comments about our financial challenges, we're also feeling these acutely in our school budgets and the areas covered by the dedicated school grant. You will see, looking at the numbers, we've already overspent, have a forecast overspent of 9.6 million. This will be compounded by schools having to increase their pension contributions for their staff and the much deserved salary increase for teachers. We also have to bear some shocking increase in gas and electricity, and this is estimated to cost at least £500,000. To give you some idea of the magnitude, we're currently trying to renegotiate our gas and electricity deals that we've got, luckily enough, running until April next year. We've been quoted 86% more for the gas and 49% respectively for the for electricity. Furthermore, despite our considerable efforts to reduce the growing deficit in the DSG through the provision of our own SEND school, Oak Tree, we're now being told by the DFE it will be postponing this. This will mean a further cost of £1 million per annum if we can't sort this out. It's imperative these issues are incorporated into the upcoming local government finance settlement, and these are just some of the challenges that we are facing. I will bring some of the other challenges as they occur to the council for you to be fully appraised of them. Just moving on to the papers, the Budget Revenue Monitoring Report for Q2. There's not much to report in here. We have things very much under control. John made reference to Slough. I mean, say we are in a position where less than 1/3% of our initial budget is actually overspent, of which half of that was due to COVID. But our business as usual budget is £205,000, which is pretty small when you consider our overall budget's about 146 million. Also, if you this paper also brings to you two supplementary estimates. John spoke about supplementary estimates. These are a really important part of the council. Nobody can spend any money unless they bring a supplementary estimate, and that supplementary estimate will always come to the executive for approval. And I think that's the way to run business. Nobody should be spending money without permission if it's outside their budget window. The two that we're bringing here tonight, one is for the Equalities and Diversity Programme, which is a total of 151,270. And the other one is a supplementary estimate for the reintegration of trading standards and the environmental health into WBC. This money was identified for next year because we brought it forward, because we can see that there are longer term savings and improved services we can offer. That's now being brought into this year. So although this is a supplementary estimate, it is only a supplementary estimate for this year. It's not an additional cost. If anybody's got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer them. The papers are all here for you to see. Very transparent, no smoke and mirrors.
Do you have a view of what the budget yesterday may have done to us and our finances, and all the emissions which were from the statement?
Yes, I do. I mean, we were basically looking at about we're looking at about £2 million shortfall initially when we put the budget together. The budget was a bit of a curate's egg. We got £1 million, which goes in, which will offset that. But with the additional costs that we're likely to be seeing with increase in national insurance, and also the increase of the electricity and the gas, and also the increase that we're seeing in the costs of labour and materials. Those costs in labour and materials don't only apply to building work, they apply to repair work. And of course, quite a lot of the repair work we do is actually done either within the HRA or it's done within the revenue account. So I think at the moment, we're probably looking at about an additional 1.5, maybe 1.8 million, which will take the shortfall in the budget to 3.8 million, but it's work in progress. I mean, there are a few things that we can do. We won't be cutting any services at this moment in time. That's not on the agenda. But I'll be talking about some savings that we've made in, although it's not directly attributable to the revenue account, we'll be talking about capital. Do remember, any capital we buy, the interest for that capital does turn up in the revenue account. So any money that we can save in the capital will reflect in the amount of interest we have to pay in the revenue account.
And what about crucial things like, is it a 3-year settlement or a 1-year settlement? And is there a continuation of New Homes bonus?
If I could answer those questions, I'd probably be working for Goldman Sachs. To be quite honest with you, I'd like to think that we do get a 3-year settlement, which is gives us some certainty. It will be disappointing if we don't. The other issue around New Homes bonuses, well, the big problem, I guess, the thing that sits on my shoulder is the levelling up, because when you're actually at the top, you can't do much levelling up. And there tends to be a tendency for some to level down and some to level up and probably meet in the middle. And that is a concern of mine.
Thank you. Any other question?
Just a quick one, John. You mentioned the DSG grant being a bigger gap. Being a bigger gap growing year on year. How's that going to end up? We're just getting at a bigger and bigger deficit. And we are still responsible for providing services, but don't have the authority to run the schools if they're academy. Is the government aware of this sort of mountain of debt that's building?
They are very aware of it. It's a strange. It's strange in the sense we're allowed to increase that debt year on year. It falls outside our normal revenue account, but at some stage there's got to be an accountability for it. Now, it can either be they're saying there's more money available for schools. Now, when we see what that money actually is, will that help us to start to reduce the deficit? We have a plan to reduce the deficit, but the problem with plans to reduce deficits is, first of all, you've got to get the actual day-to-day spending under control, as most of the schools in our borough are academies, and nobody would for one moment want schools not to have adequate amounts of money to educate the children. It would be a problem if they said that you've got to adopt you've got to put your dedicated school grant, but they haven't done for a number of years. When you look at ours at 9.6, when you look at some of the other people around the countries, I mean, they are just make your hair stand on end. When you start looking at some of the large metropolitan councils, they run into tens and tens of millions. So I don't think that will happen, but who knows? It may, as again, it's all around how they do the levelling up. I do think, though, we are beginning to get to grips. I mean, when I picked up this portfolio, we were in a year that we overspent £2.2 million. The supplementary budgeting and working closely with the excellent director of children's services, we've managed to turn it round. So last year's accounts show a surplus of £80,000, which is quite incredible. And I would suggest that the standard of service provided by our school is probably at its highest level it's ever been. And we are hoping, fingers crossed, that when Ofsted come in and decide to look at our children's services, we will achieve a good Ofsted. That's really what we're aiming to do.
John, you know how important new homes bonus is to us. How do we tackle, or I'm looking at John 1 or John 2, you John H, is it something that we should be taking up with Gove? Because I know we had some good interaction with Genric when.
Can I reply to that?
Yeah.
I'm regularly talking to all the 4 MPs, and I say 4 MPs because on certain issues, Matt Rodder is a star, and we've alerted them to the precariousness of our financial situation. Our financial situation is precarious, not because we're in a bad place, because we're in a good place. Our finances are managed very well, but because the health and social care bill, because we have a huge number of people, like 85% who are self-funders, will hit us more than it hits everybody else. As we have a high level of development, and particularly last year, as you know, we built more houses than we thought they would ever build. We are particularly dependent on the new homes bonus, the dedicated school grant. The high needs block is under attack because the Department of Education looks like they're going to fail to provide Oak Tree in time. So we have all these external pressures, which are large, and we can only sort them out with a long, big contact with our MPs. And thank God we are Conservatives, and we got 3 Conservative MPs who are batting for us. If we weren't Conservatives, I'm not sure where we would go. But the other headwinds are internal, and those headwinds we're going to have to cope with ourselves, which means we may have to, in the next quarter, sharpen our pencils and start looking at what we can do internally, because those headwinds are not government headwinds. They are to do with the general economic situation in the world, which is really the overheating problems. The gas and electricity prices cannot be attributed to central government. They're really a worldwide issue, and other countries are suffering even worse than we are, particularly West Germany, or Germany, I should say. It indicates my age. So, would you like to add any of that, John?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is the comment about it being the external and worldwide issues as well, such as gas and electricity and energy in general. But we are in a good place. I mean, we have a good level of revenue budgets. We have a good a high level of revenue reserves. We have a high level of non-specific usable revenue reserves. So we're in a very good place. Unlike most, and I don't take any pleasure in this. Unlike most of the people around us, we've been building the war chest. We could see these things were beginning to come upon us. Some of the investment that we made is now beginning to bear fruit. We see our commercial investments now paying all the interest, not just the interest on their investments, the town centre, they paying all the interest that this council incurs, which is to the equivalent of just under, I think it's just on £10, equivalent to £10 per resident, taxpaying resident in the borough. So we're in a lot better place than a lot of people, but we still have to be extremely careful because the numbers John talks about, especially with social care, they're just the sort of things that could knock you sideways. But we are aware, we know what we're doing. I mean, to say that we don't know what we're doing and to say that we may have underestimated in a pandemic, I think coming out of this year's budget, planning to overspend by about £300,000, £400,000, I think we've done pretty good, actually.
If anybody wants to have any support on that statement, they only need to read the report on Slough, which is very sober reading. Any other questions, John?
Got no questions, only really to make the recommendation, which is to note the financial impact as illustrated for COVID, the overall forecast on the general fund, the revenue and the housing. Again, even the HRA, we have collected our rents. I learnt today we've collected 99.9% of our social housing rents. And that's the reason for that is not because we go around there and throw them out. We haven't been able to. It's because we go around there and we negotiate, we help. Wherever we find somebody who can't pay for their rent, we work with the citizens' advice, and we work also with benefits and try and get them into a place that we can. There's no point having a debt with somebody who can't pay it. It just wrecks people's lives and it makes but we've been lucky, as I say, our residents have paid 99.9% of our social rents. So if you look at our housing revenue account, which is our social homes that we purchased from the government, which we thought we owned, you will see that has a surplus in it of 1.4 million, quite healthy. The other thing, number 3, is basically to approve a supplementary estimate of £151,270, and this is for equalities and diversity programme. I think it's something we need to do. It has lots of support, I know, right across the political divide. And the other thing, as I said, number 4, is to approve a supplementary estimate, because we're now decided to do the trading standards and environmental health integration this year rather than wait till next year. So that's not new money. That is a reallocation of money from last year, that's from next year into this year.
Everybody happy with that? Everybody in favour? Anybody against? No abstentions? No. Thank you. On capital.
Yes, as I said, I mean, capital's important in the sense that it delivers the roads, it delivers the schools, and a lot of the other things that people rely on in the budget. If you look at our capital programme, you will see that we've underspent. Now, the good news about the underspending isn't because we've cut any services. What we've actually done, if you look at the underspending, which is 8.15 million, that's savings basically in Optilis, changing the way we work with Optus on the transformation programme, and other savings in adult social care and health, which again during COVID is quite an achievement. Children's services, there's no material variances identified at the moment. Community insights, same. Also the housing revenue account, well, I just spoke about that. But one big thing, and it was always something that got up my nose a bit, that we were expected to pay for a Great Crested Newt survey across the borough. It was going to cost us a massive £4.8 million. That's now been taken on by an external organisation. So that's now come out of the capital budget. And the other thing is the 1.4 million that which is really, I guess, underspend in the town centre and on the Bournemouth Leisure Centre that we developed. So we've managed to cut how much capital we're spending. We haven't cut any of the services, and we haven't cut back on any of the projects. We have projects, and one was mentioned earlier on, that we are looking at. We're reevaluating them. We're hoping that those projects will go forward, and once we've done the reevaluation, they will go back into the programme. But you would not expect us just to plough on with additional costs, especially when the prices for those projects increase by 1/3. And that's something that we need to look at. We can see the reasons why it increases by 1/3, but what we will do is we will look at cost engineering to see whether or not there's any money that can be saved without reducing the quality of what we're trying to provide, and also if there is any other areas where there is an opportunity to make money. So I'm hoping that our capital programme will stay on course. There is one big question. One of the questions will be how the Public Loans Board, it's out for consultation at the moment. They may be changing the way that, or they may change the criteria and how they lend the money, in which case that may have an impact on some of our plans. But again, I can't tell you one way or another whether or not it will be easier to borrow money from the government or harder. I think I know my view, but until I know the actual facts, I don't really want to comment on it. Thank you.
All in favour? Happy? Any against? No. Abstentions? No. Thank you. Pauline, bus service improvement plan.
Thank you very much, John.
Your picture's absolutely superb, actually. Absolutely superb.
Right, this is the next phase of the bus service improvement plan. If you remember, this is being driven by a statutory timetable in order for us to maintain our current bus service funding from the government. This is the next stage, which we have to produce and approve by the 31st of October 2021. It's still a very high-level document in that it has some aspirational and ambitious policies in it, but it hasn't got a lot of detail. And we've spent quite a lot of time talking to various bus companies and other providers of transport in the borough in order to try and get a view of what they are going to be putting in their improvement plans. So this bus service improvement plan will enable us to bid on future funding opportunities as part of the £3 billion transitional plan for bus services. And we also may receive other funding based on how ambitious our BSIP is. I think you'll see that it is pretty ambitious. We want to enable local bus services to recover to pre-pandemic levels and then facilitate continued growth in bus passenger numbers. We want to grow our bus service provision to ensure the right level of service in the right place, bearing in mind at the moment that the council is unable to provide its own bus service. We have to use third-party bus services, either from Reading Buses or from other private companies. We want a bus service that supports the continued economic growth of the whole borough and the wider Thames Valley region. And we've looked particularly at end-to-end routes rather than looking at individual towns and villages. So we're looking at the direction people want to travel to try and help provide a bus service that supports continued economic growth. We're also trying to improve the accessibility to transport services in the local bus network. and we'd like a greener bus network which harnesses the opportunities to reduce carbon emissions. So the things we're looking at are frequency, reliability and speed, fares and ticketing and how they integrate, comprehensiveness of the network, ease of understanding of the network, integration with other transport opportunities like rail, bus emissions and green vehicles, customer satisfaction and innovation, which comes back to some of the ideas about real-time information and also the integration of ticketing. And we've set some ambitious targets on journey time, punctuality, passenger growth and customer satisfaction. And you can see on page 43 that we're looking at area or corridor specific policies. And you can see in point 1, we've got Reading, Woking, Bracknell corridor, Reading, Shinfield, Alberfield, Wokingham, Reading, 3 Mile Cross, Spencer's Wood, Reading, Twyford, Wargrave and Henley. So very important to get our links into Twyford. Early, Lower Early and Maiden Early, the links in between Woodley and North Early, Wokingham and the surrounding areas, and also bus services in the rural low density areas. And we're looking at, as I said before, fares, ticketing, integration and other opportunities to improve our service. So this is just the overall strategy. I'd like your support to publish this and to continue negotiating with local transport providers on detailed measures and facilities that help us deliver this enhanced partnership. And that's all I have to say.
Questions? When do you think we'll be going to the next stage, Pauline?
The next stage is 31st of March 22. So it's a very, very racy timetable, which is why we haven't been able to do as much consultation as I would have liked to have done. We just do not have very much time. The deadlines that we've been set are very, very racy. And if we don't meet the deadlines, we drop out of the competition without, any more opportunity.
Thank you. Pauline, might not be related to the plan, but it is something that we've always considered would be a good idea. What about park and rides and multi-journey park and rides? Is there any plans to do anything like that?
That's one of the things we're looking at, John, is how we could possibly link the park and rides up so that you can go from one to another and potentially get better links, particularly to Twyford Station and the New Elizabeth line. So yeah, that's one of the things we'll look at.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Everybody happy with that? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Anybody against? No. Extensions? No. Thank you. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, John.
Laura.
Thank you. This executive decided on the 29th of July to engage our local residents and businesses in a community deliberative process on the climate emergency. A proposal is being developed after extensive review, which is recommended to be approved tonight. We know that we need to take our community with us on the journey for our borough to be net zero carbon by 2030. And this means constant engagement and listening to their needs, their concerns and ambitions. What is proposed has been designed to enable this council to engage with a diverse range of people from across the borough. We want to start it in November with residents engaging with the deliberative process in the new year. So I'd kindly ask that this executive approves the proposal tonight.
Any questions?
I've got a question, John.
Fire away.
Yeah, Laura, I'd just like to understand why we're doing it now.
Thank you. So we know we need to constantly engage with residents to get the behaviour change that we know we need to see to get to net zero carbon by 2030. We launched a consultation when we're designing the climate emergency strategy, and we got some great feedback and ideas from residents, but that was a while ago now, and 2030 is a while away still. So we really do need that drumbeat of engagement to make sure that residents know that we're going in the right direction, we're getting ideas from them, that they're happy with what we're doing on climate emergency, and that we're leveraging opportunities with them. So we really do have a plan to continue to engage with residents long term on climate emergency, and this proposal on community deliberative processes is just the next step in doing just that.
Thank you.
The only question I would have, Laura, is that in the introduction to Appendix A, our commitment was to do everything we could to achieve net zero, not to becoming net zero, because we can't do that on our own. It's not possible. So just any other comments, questions? Those in favour. So would you like to read the recommendation, Laura?
Do you want me to read it out? It is recommended that the executive, 1, approve the proposal to deliver a community deliberative process for the climate emergency through deliberative peer groups and e-panels to engage the community with the council's response to climate change. 2, approve £46,000 to fund the delivery of community deliberative process for the climate emergency as described in the proposal in Appendix A. Number 3, note the key objectives and outcomes of the process for wider engagement with the community to empower stakeholders, including but not limited to Woking Borough residents, young people, community groups, and the business community to play as full a role as possible in achieving a net zero carbon borough by 2030. 4, finally, note that outcomes and recommendations from the process will be taken to council next year with the commitment that their feasibility will be explored by officers. Officers will report back to council to inform which recommendations will be incorporated into the climate emergency action plan to support further action.
All in favour? Against? Abstentions? None? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the executive meeting, and thank you very much for your presence and attention.